Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today I'm so happy to have with me Ingrid Ostbye. Ingrid is a registered nurse and clinical nurse consultant currently working in the area of peer support, as well as being a health coach and consulting new parents with sleeping and feeding routines. At the same time as this, Ingrid is also currently studying to become an end of life doula. So you bring so much of a holistic approach to like I just have this image of the circle of life almost. So thank you so much for joining me here today, Ingrid.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for having me on your podcast and everything else that you share wonderfully with the world.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I guess to start, like, could you share a little bit about your background and what led you down the path that you're on at the moment?
Sure. So I've been in the health industry for 35 years now. And as you said, my background's in nursing. Um, my areas that I've worked in have been intensive care in both adults and pediatrics. Pediatrics is my specialty. I've done trauma care. I've worked as a clinical nurse consultant in the community, working with families with children in the obesity clinic. So we started a new model of care not that long ago. And once that model was created, I moved away from that space. Um, I've done education, masters in education, and taught nursing at university. And pretty much just contacted anyone and everyone who looks at holistically looking after themselves and having and creating a lovely work-life balance and a life balance. So people would often come to me with their conflict and say, "You're so good at this stuff." They kind of came to me, so I went, "Oh well, it's easy for me to just look at it in a different way and kind of unpack it and see what's really going on." And people found that really helpful, so that's what led me to that.
Yeah, it's kind of like following the path as it unfolded for you and you got feedback along the way. You're like, "Oh, this feels good," but also people are coming to me for this at the same time. So like, let's just keep marrying those things as we go along.
Exactly right. So, and it kept on happening. So people would say, "Oh, Ingrid, can you help me with this or this happened?" Even
Mm.
in, at sporting events or something in, football or something, they go, "Oh, we're having a lot of trouble with, one particular person," or, they started a new job or something. So I'd go, "Oh, well, maybe if you think about it this way, you might look at it differently." So it kept on
Yeah.
happening. So I couldn't ignore it. And I ended up finding that I had a little bit of a talent for it. And it wasn't stressful
Uh,
for me. It was quite easy. So
yeah, you were the wise woman in the midst of it all, it sounds like.
that's it. So
Um,
yeah.
mm. What is it about I'm going to refer to it as the circle of life, but if you have a preferred way, let me know. But like, what is it about that holistic approach to that circle of life and having those touch points of support along the way that speaks to you? Because I find that really interesting, but also really, really powerful.
Yeah, so I think with the circle of life, people, let's start with conflict and trauma. It's just a part of life. And I think just, the year that's just passed has been a little bit traumatic for some people, and others have celebrated it marvelously. Um, and that just personifies that everyone is a little bit different. And I just think that managing conflict or things that don't feel so comfortable is a much better way to live your life rather than sitting in a place of anger or even wonderment as to why is this always happening. And we always know the 80-20 rule. There's always going to be a few people that we may not necessarily like, but we do always have to work with people and be professional. So
Yeah,
that's
we like there's no point in hiding from how to build those skills because it's still useful. Like, even if there's people that we love around us, having those skills is super, super important as well.
absolutely, yeah. And I always look at intention. I think that mostly people's intentions are not as we may perceive them if we're in if we're in a place of thinking that they're not meaning the best, and often it's more
Mhm.
a reflection of where they're coming from. It's not generally personal. So if you can take that step back and have some perspective and look at what their intention is, I think that really helps as well.
Yeah, I find that really useful, like, because it's that balance of, like, still understanding what's okay for you or where a boundary has been crossed, for example, but also having that understanding and that that maybe the empathy of it's not always about us, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's entirely about where this person is trying to, like, what they're trying to achieve, or what's causing it, like maybe they want to feel safe and that's what's showing up in the behavior, or anything like that. So it helps to just have a better understanding of
Yeah.
our people
And
around us.
being, I think being somewhat reflective on, gee, I wonder why I did get a little bit cranky with that, or
Mm.
what's going on for me at the moment that I actually responded to that, and sort of unpack that a little bit, and then work out, oh, maybe I'm a little bit stressed at the moment, or maybe some core value of mine has been, trampled on a little bit. So maybe I need to think about a boundary that I may need to set around that kind of conversation or that behavior,
Yeah.
to actually work out what's not okay, and more importantly, why it's not okay. If it
Yeah.
feels like it's not okay, then think about it a little bit more beyond what's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's so much under the surface that we can look at, like about ourselves, as well as having the understanding that it might be about other things for the other person as well.
Exactly.
Um, yeah,
And with
nothing
that,
is.
with health workers, we tend to, and police officers and teachers, we often take on a lot of environmental trauma, or what we call vicarious trauma, that we tend
Mm.
to suck up like a sponge over time. And it's a little bit like the spilt milk in the kitchen that, breaks the last straw in your back, or whatever the
Yeah.
I'm not really crying over this spilt milk. What is it? It's because we've absorbed all of the, trauma that we've been
Oh,
around,
yeah.
may not have actually realized that that's building up and building up.
Absolutely. Like I had a moment right at the end of 2020, so like only a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking for my recipe book because I have like a little exercise book I've kept since I was in school of like my favorite recipes. And I couldn't find it, like, it wasn't in my recipe book box or anything, and I just started crying, like, not full on sobbing, but I just started, like, getting teary, and I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Okay, I need a break, I need a break, this is, like, not about the book, this isn't about any one thing at all, it's just it's been a year, and
Exactly.
I just need a break." So,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's so useful to have that reminder for ourselves when we feel those things of, oh, I'm not broken, I'm not being stupid, it's probably just things building up a little bit.
And it's actually okay to have those moments and then go, wow, that wasn't about my recipe book at all.
Yeah.
Theory because I'm tired, or I'm exhausted, or
Yeah.
I have a lot of things on my mind and I just need some downtime, and just to
Yeah.
cup, as we both say.
Yeah, it's super informative for us, so it helps direct us to what we need to do next for ourselves.
You're right. Yeah.
I know that you also talk about the circle of control a lot because this kind of plays a role in what we were just talking about as well. So, can you explain what the circle of control means and how
Absolutely.
it might impact how we lead our lives as
Yeah,
well?
it's really nice to look at things that we can actually control. So if you can visualize drawing a circle, and that can be your little circle, so your inner circle of control, if you like. So things that we can actually control. So we can control what we think, the words that we say, the actions that we do, our behavior, our reactions, the decisions that we make, the choices that we make, our mindset, our attitude, the kind of mood that we're in. We can even think about and control our actual work ethic, and simple things as what we actually watch on TV. So
Mm.
they're things that we can control. So when we're thinking about things that may be annoying us or causing anxiety or making us feel stress, we can think, okay, take a step back. Now, what can I actually control here? I can control how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, how I'm reacting. This is perfect for people who have got teenagers, and I have a 17-year-old that I do with.
Oh.
He's starting to get the idea of it. And especially with this year of COVID, he couldn't
Mm.
control not going to school. He couldn't control, what was happening with the exams and the system changing. So So once you've drawn your little circle of control, and you can put a whole lot of other stuff in there that relates specifically to you, you can then draw another circle around that. And that's what I like to call a circle of influence. So a little second circle. So not a circle of control, but something that you can have some kind of influence around. So it's more about behavioural and thinking changes. So our habits. So who follows us on social media, we can actually control that. So that's a nice thing that we can do. We can't stop people sometimes looking at our social media, but we can, sometimes block them or. I can also influence my commitments or other people who are asking commitments of me. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. If you can't do it, it's okay to say no. You can't stop people from asking you, but you can certainly say no, not at the moment. I can influence my productivity at work, but if work is saying that I can't or I can do more, then I can't really control that. And I can't really control things like my children's future, but I can influence by giving some advice. Sometimes it's better just to take a step back and let them find their own circle of control so that they know what they've got control over. And then we draw a really big circle around the second circle. And these are the things that are out of our control. So other people's thoughts, we obviously can't control. Other people's opinions, we can't control. Other people's actions, behaviours, their words and their choices. I think that's really important to learn, and how to relate your feelings to what you can and can't control. And then there's the really big picture of world politics, the threat of war, the weather, the traffic, the media. But once again, we can control what we watch on TV, so you can actually control the level of influence there if that's something that you like to do. We can't control sporting events. We can't control COVID. You can't control where you were born, public transport, the prices that are happening in the economy, the petrol prices, things like that. So people do get cranky when they get stuck in traffic, or they sit on a bus and there's a car accident, but these things are out of your control. So it's, I know.
It just helps you take like an exhale. And I feel like to give it like a tangible, like even more of a tangible example, like you've given so many good ones in that, but I feel like that's what got me through 2020 with COVID, for example, is like I really quickly recognized like, oh, I'm putting energy into something that I literally have no control over. Right. That's out of my control.
Yes.
What can I influence? Oh, the energy that I put out into the world and what's around me. So I'm going to try and create more of what I want to experience. That's part control, but part influence.
Absolutely.
And then I brought it in going, okay, and I can control the boundaries that I have around certain conversations. Like, because for me, being in any kind of speculation either way was too much. So I'm like, well, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going, like, I can't have this conversation right now. Or I am not starting a conversation about that either. Or, like being really careful of who I had those conversations with, for example, as well, was part of my circle of control. So,
and how empowering did that feel? Because you made that cognitive conscious decision that didn't feel like, hey, this is why, and I'm going to set a boundary.
Yeah, like it's, it felt so empowering, and it was a lot of still feeling feels, because like there's a lot of uncertainty, but there was a lot more peace around it, because I wasn't trying to grip onto something that like my subconscious knew, like you can't control this, so what are you doing? Like there wasn't that resistance, because it was like, well, I don't know, so what can I do? So I took my attention to what I could do. And I feel like I really thrived as a result because of that. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't challenging in certain ways, but like, yeah, it was such more empowering experience, rather than being at the mercy of the dishwasher, of like the washing machine of emotions that can come in when you're like, I'm trying to control this, but it keeps sweeping in and telling me otherwise, and sweeping in and telling me otherwise. Like it made such a difference to my mindset and my mind state around it.
You listened and you were able to stop. So some people get caught in that washing
Mm.
cycle and they get stuck on spin.
Yeah, yeah, it's the
So
worst.
I think that if people could, as a practical um, thing that they could do, is write down their feelings and then write down their
Mm,
facts. And I have done this and I still do this. Okay, maybe I'm feeling a little bit worried about what's going to happen.
mm,
I'm feeling this, and this, and you can write down 1,000 different words for how you're feeling, and then you can write down the facts, and then you can go back to your circle of control and just look at what I used to just put a little red tick on what I can control.
yeah.
And I just acknowledge that that feeling is okay. I can feeling anxious. What can I do to make myself feel anxious? How can I fill my cup? What would make
Mm,
me feel better? Will I have a chat to a friend? Will I simply just acknowledge that I do feel anxious and it will pass? Or it's a bit like if you're looking at your app to get the bus and it's running late and you 5 minutes up the street and you've got to run up the hill. Well, maybe the next day I might go a little bit earlier. I can control that stuff, but I can't control if the
yeah.
bus is late.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I guess it's
How d You
perspective.
go? Yeah,
Like,
it is. It
yeah,
is just that perspective of, it's a perspective. That's actually all it is, and it can be challenging, I think, to, like, that's the work, is letting go of the control enough
yes.
just to acknowledge
And I think
is
we put, as humans, God love it,
mm.
so many expectations on ourselves,
Yeah,
then we unfortunately project those expectations onto others.
yeah,
And the circle of control has helped me in the past with that. So I can't have expectations of others unless we have a conversation around that and
mm,
we come to an understanding and gain some insight, and then it evolves from there. And that's where the conflict stuff comes in with my peers at work. So,
yeah, that's a really good one, because that shows up a lot in relationships of any kind, like,
and yeah,
getting so caught up in, um like, what are they doing that? Like, and,
yeah,
what if they do that? Or, like,
yeah,
what if? And that's not something, like, it's more about, are you more at peace just sort of going, you can't control that, but what can you do if they
that's
do
right.
that?
Yeah, and how come they can come to work late every day and I
Mm,
can't? That kind of stuff. Well, let it go. Your work ethic is that you get to work on time and some people don't. And
yeah.
that's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much that we can get ourselves caught up
Yeah.
in.
And it's like the new parent treadmill, I like to call it as well, because it's such a shock for families to have a newborn, such a change. And I say, well, if you don't bath the baby today, no one's going to die. It's okay.
Mm,
Just because the book says you must this, you must that, let's put it into perspective. You didn't get to it today. That's okay. You
yeah.
can still wash their face and their bottom and everything's okay. Do it the next day.
Yeah. It's
So
not a it's not exactly like newborn babies are outside running around getting dirty, right? Like, it's
right, which is different to a toddler that's maybe
mm,
playing in the dirt. Well, there's a different reason to that as well. So
yeah.
yeah.
That is such perspective. Um, how do you how do you determine the difference between fact and feeling?
So feelings, I get people to sit and just take a breath. What's going on for you? Like what's really going on for you?
Mm,
And then generally people will get a little bit upset, and that's a really great way to start. And then they
yeah.
might go, I don't know, I just don't know. They get so confused. So then we go into, are there any physical things going on? What are you visualizing? What are you most worried about? And then, the list then just sort of starts to flow, which is really beautiful because it's quite releasing for people to, that it's not fair thing comes up quite a lot.
Mm,
That you unpack that with people for completely different reasons, and everyone's got different reasons, but um, or somebody didn't get a job that they applied for, and that's not fair, and well,
yeah.
we can learn from that. So the feelings around that are real, but the facts may be that, well, you applied for the job. Did you get some feedback? Yes. Well, how can you do better next time? Well, there's another fact. We can change your resume, or the response to a question in an interview or something like that. Um, so you just keep on writing down the facts. Well, the bus was late today. So maybe I need to get the bus that comes a little bit earlier so that I don't get to work late. So I can actually control that. And that's a fact that, there is another timetable or a bus earlier on that timetable. Um,
Yeah.
it is raining today. It is hot today. You can say, oh my God, it's so hot today 1,000 times. And someone might say, for goodness sake, can you just be quiet about how hot it is? No one can control that. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think the thing is it's okay to feel how you're feeling, understand why, be reflective about it. And then you actually feel better and understand that feeling and you can work with it. And
Yeah,
then
that's
the facts are the facts and just do your circle of control. You can do circle of control with what actual facts are going on there. And you can write feelings all on the outside. There's lots of visual ways of doing it to get a little bit of perspective on it.
yeah, it's so powerful. That's what I tell my people, like my clients all the time, is like feelings like aren't bad, like they can feel yuck, but like they're there to be felt, and we can acknowledge what they are, and it doesn't mean that we're condoning them or saying, oh, I want more of this, by calling it what it is. But I also feel like even I can't hear enough how much feelings aren't facts as well, because it's such an important reminder too of like, oh, I feel like rejected, so like a job interview that I didn't get, or like someone who didn't want to go on a date, or like whatever it is, like
Yeah,
whatever resonates with people, like I feel rejected. It
yeah,
doesn't mean that you were. It doesn't mean that you will always be. It doesn't mean that that is your permanent state. It doesn't mean that that was even the case.
exactly.
Most of the time it just wasn't the right match, but like
Yeah,
it
and you've got to
is.
trust as well that that wasn't the right match. And
Yeah,
again, we can't control them saying yes or no. I'll go on a date with
yeah,
you, or I won't go on a date with you. So
yeah.
entirely their choice, and you're still okay. You're still
Mhm.
stable.
Y
You can
and
still.
yeah, you can feel rejected,
Mm,
but it doesn't mean that you are someone who only gets rejected.
no, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Hurtful at times and
Yeah.
hard to go through that process. And in that moment, you may do, but then you sit with it and go, well, hang on a minute, I can't control that.
Yeah, sometimes our feelings really hurt our own feelings. Like,
Yeah, and it's a bit like thoughts are only thoughts, that mindfulness. So,
mm,
okay, I'm feeling rejected today, and that was a little bit sad, but I'm going to go do something that might make me feel better. I might go for a walk for 20 minutes, or listen
yeah.
to, have a bit of meditation, or do something that's, nice, call a friend, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's oh, what can make me counteract that feeling of rejection?
Yeah, and
And
I
it's
like
like, oh, because
to think about, also do a list of, so feelings tend to be, people focus on negative stuff. I then say, well, what's the opposite of that feeling? So what would
yeah.
the opposite of rejection be?
Mm,
Acceptance. Well, you have a friend, she's going to take your phone call, or he's going to take your phone call, and you're going to have a great chat. I don't recommend ringing to whinge about the fact that you do that you feel rejected. You can start obviously with that, but you're not going to be rejected by your friend, or
yeah.
um, so doing it with somebody that's safe um,
Yeah.
is not a bad way to start to feel better a little, a little more about that stuff. So
Mm,
all the negative stuff, I always say, well, tell me what the opposite feeling might be for that.
yeah, so you can focus on what you want to actually create or step towards, or
Yeah.
like
And
work
what will make
towards.
you feel happier rather than feeling sad, or what's the opposite of
Mm,
anxious? Are you worried? Are you concerned? Well, what are you concerned about? And well, how can we
yeah.
control it? Well, we can't. And it always comes back to that, and it kind of grounds you.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
How does, because trauma is a complicated beast, as we know, like, so how do these tools and these practices, how do they work in with trauma? Because I understand that it would be different for each person, but is there a role that it can play in that?
So, trauma is manifested in so many different ways, as you well know, emotionally, cognitively,
Mm,
physically. So, I think that picking up on people's behaviour, their words, maybe they're taking more sick leave, or maybe they're saying they're more tired, or they're actually looking tired, and having the validation and the recognition that there is a trauma process going on. I think the acknowledgement and the validation is really important, because then that person goes, yes, that's what that is. That's why I'm not sleeping. That's why I'm a little more snappy. That's why I feel like I don't want to go to work at the moment, or whatever the case may be, or I may not want to talk to a particular person that's, been challenging to talk with lately. So
Yeah.
I think unpacking it and doing the circle of control and working on our facts and the feelings, and looking at some stages of healing around some of the trauma, that will hopefully, over a fairly short space of time for most people, end up in that transformation space, is really important.
Yeah. And trusting that it is like it will be a process and it is a practice also. So like it may happen very quickly, or it may take a little bit longer, or it may be just one of the modalities that supports you, like in between other modalities that you're using as that as well. But um, it's all in support of you rather than
Yes.
giving your power away either. Like
It's not being powerless, it's actually being
yeah,
powerful. And I
yeah,
think that you become more productive and more passionate and more giving, within your whole life, once you realize that this has happened. That's okay. I've acknowledged it, I recognize it. And if it comes up again, and it will happen, because trauma, affects everyone, so many times throughout their life, even if it's just work.
mm,
Um, Work trauma for police, ambulance, all sorts of, health workers, like I said, teachers. I mean, children are really difficult sometimes to be around all the time. But I think working together as a group, so the peer support that we provide for each other, even if it's in a brief conversation over a coffee, just for that pure validation, I feel the same way, is really very helpful and very healthy to talk about and acknowledge, rather than form unhealthy habits around it, like drinking alcohol, or
yeah.
eating buckets of ice cream, which I've done that. So
Oh yeah, I'm who hasn't? Yeah, it's looking at, can the ratio of good habits just be a little bit more like higher than the ratio, like to the ratio of bad or
yeah,
non-helpful.
that's right. And I think that the influence circle with changing our habits around our behavior and thinking comes in quite
Mm,
nicely there. Is this a
yeah,
healthy behavior? And sometimes it's just the way you walk into your house. Don't put your bag there, put it somewhere else. And brain training, we can train our brains. They're so clever that we can actually change our habits quite easily, with daily practice, and it doesn't take
yeah.
too long. So, and forward planning is always great, isn't it? But it doesn't always.
I love it. Yeah. I'm that kind of person that likes like to be able to see the vision a little bit better, and then I can be in the present way easier. So
Yeah. Well, I've
yeah.
already got today over. I'm thinking how wonderful tomorrow is going to be. And yesterday was yesterday. I can't do anything about that. And, move
Yeah.
forward. Past is the
Yeah.
past, and you can acknowledge it and then move forward. So yeah, the circle of life thing, I think, is what I'm really about. So, helping people with conflict, being, doing some research around disease with, oxidative stress and inflammation, and how that's really impacting our lifestyle at the moment and our bodies, even, with the food that we're eating, the soil that isn't as great as it once was. And then the end of life doula, I think that's all just a nice circle.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I just before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you more about the end of life doula, because I find it such a beautiful concept, and as we were talking about trauma and empowerment, and even like the circle of control, that plays such a role in why, I imagine, why like end of life, having an end of life doula there can help to ease a lot of that, especially like the trauma that can be involved. So
Yes, yeah.
can
So
you,
it's
yeah,
quite similar to the midwifery doulas that people may have heard about, and you may have heard of as well, in that people are empowered because they feel as though they have a voice and they have choices. So people don't understand that they actually do have choices. You don't really need a funeral home. You can have whatever you want. Um,
mm,
and you can say goodbye to people the way you want. And families that have lost children, and that's something that unfortunately I've seen in my pediatric experience over the many years now is very sad. And I've seen families and their siblings, really be traumatized. So they've got layers and layers of trauma, and then they feel as though choice is taken away. So I really would be working around the advocacy of the choices for the family, for children, children's wishes, and then with adults as well, adults' wishes, as quirky as some of them may be, and make it really celebratory, and let people grieve in their own time. And it's okay to be sad because it is sad, but it's also okay to celebrate someone's life in a beautiful way, and create some beautiful memories in the grief. And then, of course, I can provide some counselling and some consultancy around the stages of grieving, because that's trauma again. So
Yeah.
For me, it just goes full circle. And if I can enhance anyone's life in that process, that's why I do what I do. That's what drives me every day.
Yeah, I love that so much. So if people want to connect with you, where can they connect with you?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn, just my name, and I'm also on Facebook. So feel free
Cool.
to send me a message, send me an email, or get in contact on Messenger with Facebook.
Yeah, I'll include that in the show notes as well, so that way people can get the spelling right and everything like that. So
Yes, that's my Norwegian background.
yeah. Thank you so, so much for joining me. I loved this conversation so much. I feel like it was a really helpful way to like step into the new year, because this is the first guest that I'm having. You're the first guest that I'm having this year. So I feel like, yeah, it's just a super helpful perspective for us all to have as we step into this new year and continue on with our lives in all the different ways that we are. So thank you
Right.
so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be in your space. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, same.